Everybody, what is going on? It's your boy Banger 2 X live and direct. You know what I
They
mean?
had no idea.
So apparently, you know what I'm saying? Apparently, a flight attendant kicks a black billionaire family off a plane, but then she doesn't realize they own the airline. So let's get straight to it, man. I don't got too much to say. Let's get straight to it. Hopefully, this is a real story because I do not want to waste my time.
They had no idea who they were dealing with.
Okay,
When a
AI
flight
voice.
attendant forced a black family out of first class, it seemed like just another act of bias. But moments later, the truth came out. This family wasn't just wealthy. They owned the entire airline. What
Woo-hoo.
happened next changed everything. Before we start the story, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy stories like this,
Get to the
make sure to
point, bro.
like, share, and subscribe for
AI
more.
voices irritate me, dog.
The boarding gate buzzed with activity as passengers moved quickly, eager to settle into their seats. Among them was a family of 3, James Anderson, his wife Celeste, and their 5-year-old son Liam. James, dressed in a tailored navy suit, carried a sleek leather briefcase. His demeanor exuded quiet confidence. Celeste, poised and radiant in a flowing ivory dress, held Liam's tiny hand
Is
as
this
he
even
skipped
real?
beside her.
Bro, I'm sorry, but is this even real right now? Like, the way this AI bot is...
Giggling. The family looked forward to their trip, a much-needed break from their hectic lives. As they stepped into the aircraft's first-class cabin, the polished interiors shimmered under the warm cabin lights. James glanced at the seat numbers with a faint smile. "Here we are," he said to Celeste, guiding her and Liam to their seats. Passengers nearby offered brief, polite nods, and the Andersons began settling in. Celeste helped Liam climb into his seat, handing him a small toy airplane that lit up his face with excitement. While James stowed their carry-ons in the overhead compartment, a flight attendant named Veronica Summers observed the family from across the cabin. Veronica's sharp gaze swept over them, her lips pressing into a thin line. She adjusted her crisp uniform as if preparing for action and strode briskly toward their seats. Her forced smile barely concealed the judgment behind her eyes. "Excuse me," Veronica said, her voice carrying an edge of authority as she addressed James. "May I see your boarding passes?" James turned to her calmly and retrieved the passes from his jacket pocket. "Of course," he replied with a polite nod, handing them over. Celeste looked up, sensing a hint of tension in Veronica's tone. Liam, oblivious to the exchange, played happily with his toy. Veronica examined the tickets with a scrutiny that felt unnecessary. Her eyebrows knitted together as she double-checked the details. "First class?" she questioned, her voice faltering slightly as if the words were hard to believe. James nodded once more, maintaining his calm. "Yes, these are our seats," he replied evenly. His tone was measured, but Celeste caught the flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Veronica hesitated, her discomfort palpable. "I'm sorry, but I need to verify something with the front desk." "Please remain
Whoa.
seated," she said curtly before turning and walking away. Her footsteps were quicker now, her movements tense. As Veronica disappeared behind the curtain, James sat back in his seat, his face unreadable. "What was that about?" Celeste asked softly, her voice laced with concern. James placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "Probably a routine
Okay,
check.
man.
Don't worry about
Is this real or not, bro? I'm starting to wonder, is this real or not? Because how is they so descriptive of what's going on, man? I'm sorry, but how?
it," he said, though there was a slight tightening around his mouth that suggested otherwise. In the galley, Veronica was on the phone with a ground staff member, her voice low but urgent. "I have a situation here," she said, glancing back toward the cabin. "There's a family in first class, and I'm not sure their tickets are valid. Could you confirm their booking?" The ground staff member sounded confused. "The
Whoa.
Andersons? Their tickets were purchased weeks ago, fully confirmed. Is there an issue?" Veronica paused, struggling to hide her irritation. "No issue," she muttered, ending the call abruptly. But instead of returning to the Andersons with an apology, her expression hardened. She adjusted her posture, taking a deep breath before heading back to the first-class cabin. When she approached their seats again, her voice was firmer. "I'm sorry, but I need you to step aside for a moment. There seems to be an error with your booking." Celeste's brows furrowed as she exchanged a glance with James. Liam looked up from his toy, confused by the sudden tension. James rose to his feet slowly, his calm exterior masking the frustration brewing beneath. "What kind of error?" he asked, his voice steady. "I need to confirm your seating," Veronica said, avoiding his gaze. She gestured toward the galley. "If you'd follow me, please." James hesitated but nodded. signaling Celeste to stay seated with Liam. As he followed Veronica, whispers began to ripple through the cabin. Passengers exchanged curious glances, sensing something unusual was unfolding. Celeste watched them go, her unease growing. Liam tugged at her sleeve, sensing the change in atmosphere. "Mommy, what's happening?" he asked softly. She smiled at him, though her grip on his hand tightened slightly. "Nothing, sweetheart," she said gently. "Daddy's just sorting something out." But in her heart, she knew this was far from routine. Something wasn't right, and her instincts told her the situation was about to escalate. In the galley, James stood calmly, his presence unshaken as Veronica fumbled with her words. "Sir," she began, her voice tinged with an unusual mix of hesitation and authority. "We're trying to clarify a seating issue. It appears that your reservation might have been flagged." James raised an eyebrow, his tone sharp yet controlled. "Flagged? I booked these tickets weeks ago, fully paid and confirmed. What exactly is the issue?" Veronica crossed her arms, a defensive stance creeping into her posture. "It's not about payment. It's just that first class is a premium cabin, and we have to ensure all seating is accurate." James stared at her for a moment, processing the implication. His lips curved slightly, not in amusement but in disbelief. Premium cabin?
Some people are so freaking dumb, bro. If this is like real, like nowadays, that's even dumber, bro. Not even any time of the day, because black people always had money. Even in the time where there was segregation, even in the time when there was, you know what I mean, discrimination, there was still a class of black people that had money. So who the hell do you think you are trying to determine whether I have money or not, man? Some of these people, sometimes you just gotta tell them straight. Who the hell do you think you are right now? You just gotta tell them that sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes you gotta tell them that. You gotta tell them, who the hell do you think you are? Huh? Trying to question me about this, right? And if she starts getting mouthy and... Anyways.
He repeated. "Are you suggesting that I don't belong here?"
Oh, exactly.
Veronica stiffened, suddenly aware of how her words might have sounded. "Of course not," she replied quickly, her tone sharp as if to mask her discomfort. "I just need to follow protocol." James took a deep breath, his calm exterior betraying a flicker of irritation. "Very well," he said, his voice steady. "Let's resolve this quickly. My family is waiting." Meanwhile, back in the cabin, passengers whispered among themselves. Celeste felt the weight of their stares but kept her focus on Liam, who was now fidgeting with his toy. A middle-aged man seated across the aisle leaned toward her, his expression sympathetic. "Is everything okay?" he asked in a low voice. Celeste offered him a tight smile. "It's just a mix-up," she said, though her tone lacked conviction. The man nodded but cast a glance toward the galley, where James and Veronica had disappeared, sensing that there was more to the situation than met the eye. As James stood waiting, Veronica stepped away to speak with another flight attendant, a younger woman named Grace. Grace's brow furrowed as she listened, glancing toward James briefly. "Did you check the reservation system?" Grace asked, her tone cautious. Veronica frowned. "Yes, but it's not just about the ticket." "Look at him," she whispered, gesturing subtly in James's direction. "Does he seem like the usual first-class passenger?" Grace's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "You can't make those kinds of judgments," she replied firmly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "If his ticket is valid, that's the end of it." Veronica huffed, brushing past Grace to return to James. "Sir," she said, her tone clipped, "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you and your family to move to the main cabin until this is sorted out."
Whoa.
James tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "On what grounds?" he asked, his voice carrying a weight that made Veronica hesitate. "Like I said, it's protocol," she replied stiffly, avoiding his gaze. James's patience wore thin, his voice lowered, carrying a firmness that made Veronica flinch. "If you're suggesting we leave first class, I expect a clear and valid reason. Because at this moment, it seems like you're acting on something other than protocol." Veronica opened her mouth to respond but was interrupted by a sudden chime over the intercom. The captain's voice filled the cabin, calm yet commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated as we finalize some adjustments. We'll ensure your comfort for the remainder of the flight." The announcement barely registered with Veronica, who felt her composure slipping. James gave her a long, pointed look before pulling out his phone. "Excuse me," he said curtly, turning away as he made a call. His tone was measured, but there was no mistaking the authority behind his words. "Is this still the right time?" he asked into the phone. After a brief pause, he added, "Good. Proceed as planned." He ended the call swiftly and returned his attention to Veronica, his calmness now unsettling. "Shall we return to my family?" James asked, his tone polite but firm. Veronica hesitated, her confidence shaken. She nodded stiffly and led the way back to the cabin, but something about James's composure made her stomach churn. As they approached the first-class section, all eyes turned toward them. James's return was met with murmurs, passengers clearly sensing the tension in the air. Celeste stood, her gaze meeting James's in silent question. He gave her a reassuring nod, but there was a subtle shift in his expression that only she noticed, a look that told her the situation was far from over. Veronica remained uneasy as she escorted James back to his seat. Her mind raced, but she maintained her professional facade. Celeste greeted James with a quiet, questioning look, but he gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Liam, sensing his father's return, beamed and resumed playing with his toy airplane, oblivious to the tension simmering around him. Before James could fully settle in, Veronica returned, her face set in determination. "Sir," she began, her voice clipped, "we've decided that it would be best for you and your family to move to the main cabin until we can
Oh
fully
my
verify your
goodness.
reservation."
Bro.
Celeste's jaw tightened, but she kept her composure, glancing at James to gauge his reaction. James took a slow, deliberate breath and looked directly at Veronica, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Our tickets have been verified. We paid for these seats in full. If there's a valid reason for us to move, I'd like to hear it now." Veronica hesitated, her confidence faltering under James's unyielding gaze. Other passengers began to take notice, their murmurs growing louder. An elderly woman a few rows away whispered to her companion, "They've been perfectly polite. What's the issue?" A younger man seated nearby interjected loudly enough for others to hear, "They're paying customers like the rest of us. Why are they being singled out?" The rising voices seemed to rattle Veronica further. "Sir, I don't want to escalate this," she said, her tone sharpening. "Please cooperate, or I'll be forced to involve security." Celeste's eyes narrowed, her patience clearly wearing thin. Before she could speak, James raised a hand gently, signaling for her to stay calm. He stood slowly, adjusting his suit jacket with deliberate precision. "If you're calling security," he said evenly, "make sure they come prepared, with an explanation." The challenge in his tone sent a ripple through the cabin. Veronica's face reddened slightly, but she held her ground. "Please gather your belongings," she insisted, her voice now betraying a hint of desperation. James locked eyes with her for a long moment before turning to Celeste. "It's fine," he said softly, his calm demeanor as steady as ever. "Let's go." Passengers watched in silence as James, Celeste, and Liam stood to collect their things. Liam clung to his toy airplane, his earlier excitement now dimmed by confusion. Celeste kept her head high, her expression unreadable as she held Liam's hand. James led the way toward the main cabin, his steps measured and deliberate, even as the weight of countless eyes bore down on them. As they walked, James reached into his pocket and sent a quick message on his phone, his face betraying nothing. They were directed to cramped seats in the middle row of the main cabin. James helped Celeste settle Liam into his new seat before sitting beside them.
Brother, I don't know what some of you dudes or, excuse my language, man. Let me talk professionally right now. I don't understand how you are so patient in this situation. I would literally get her fired on the spot right there if I own that airline company, and I will make sure I will call the district manager. You get what I'm trying to say? I will make sure, because he actually had the authority to get her fired on the spot. I don't know why this guy's trying to be humble right now. I'm not believing this at all, but
The contrast between the space and luxury of first class and the tight confines of the main cabin was stark, but neither James nor Celeste showed any outward reaction. Meanwhile, Veronica returned to the galley, her nerves fraying as she overheard the murmurs from first-class passengers. "That wasn't right," one man muttered. "They had tickets. Why treat them like that?" Another added, "This is going to backfire." Veronica ignored the comments, but her discomfort grew. As she reached the galley phone, it buzzed, startling her. She picked it up hesitantly, her voice shaky. "This is Veronica," she said. The captain's voice came through, firm and no nonsense. "Miss Summers, I just received a call from the airline's executive team. They've been contacted directly by a passenger on this flight. I need to know exactly what's going on." Veronica's stomach dropped. She stumbled over her words, her confidence evaporating. It was just a routine issue," she stammered. "I thought there might have been a mistake with their tickets." There was a long pause on the other end, and when the captain spoke again, his tone carried a warning. "You need to handle this carefully. We cannot afford a situation like this. I suggest you tread lightly until further notice." Veronica hung up the phone, her palms sweaty. She glanced toward the main cabin where James sat with his family, his expression calm but with a quiet intensity that made her stomach churn. For the first time, she felt the weight of her decisions bearing down on her, and the growing sense that she had underestimated
it's
who
a
she was
fake
dealing
story,
with.
man. This is not
James
real,
sat in the main cabin, his posture straight and composed, as if the downgrade to a cramped seat hadn't fazed him. Celeste sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on Liam's shoulder as he played with his toy airplane. Though outwardly calm, her sharp glances toward the first-class cabin betrayed her simmering frustration. James, however, seemed unbothered. He pulled out his phone, typed a brief message, and then leaned back, observing the situation with a quiet air of control. Back in the first-class cabin, the passengers' murmurs had grown louder. A tall man in a tailored suit leaned toward Veronica as she walked past. "That family had valid tickets," he said, his tone critical. "What exactly was the problem?" Veronica tried to keep her voice firm, though her nerves were clearly frayed. "It's just a procedural matter. Everything's under control." The man frowned but didn't press further, though his disapproval was evident. Veronica hurried back to the galley where her colleague Grace was organizing refreshments. Grace shot her a disapproving glance as she handed over a tray of drinks. "You need to fix this," Grace said in a low voice. "That man isn't just any passenger. He's been calm, but I can tell he's not letting this slide." Veronica bristled. "I was just following protocol. It's not my fault if people can't handle being questioned."
What protocol,
Grace
man?
set the tray down with more force than necessary, her patience clearly wearing thin. "Protocol doesn't mean you single people out based on assumptions, and now you've turned the entire cabin against you." Veronica opened her mouth to retort but stopped when the galley phone buzzed again.
That's one
Her
thing
stomach
about
twisted as she
racist
picked it
stuff.
up. This time the voice on
One thing I know about racist too is being racist is just dumb sometimes. Not all the time. It's dumb because you thinking that people of the same race is gonna agree with you and have the same points and same points and values as you. But in reality, that's not true, man. You thinking, oh yeah, I don't like this type of people, and then you're trying to tell the people that you share your skin complexion with, right, or your culture with, right, and talk about other people. They're not gonna agree with you because you never know that person, the person you work with. Example, if both of my colleagues say, if I have a colleague that's black and I tell that black person, oh, I don't like these type of people, right? I don't know that my colleague could be married to those type of people. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Don't just think because you're the same race, you have the same values and the same opinions. You know what I'm saying? No, you don't. So don't be dumb. Being racist is dumb.
the other end wasn't the captain's. It was the airline's executive office. "Miss Summers," a calm but firm voice said, "we've received a direct complaint from a passenger on your flight. It's regarding the handling of a seating issue in first class." Veronica's breath caught. "I was just following." The voice cut her off sharply. "Save your explanations. You've removed a family with fully confirmed first-class tickets. The passenger in question is James Anderson. I suggest you look up his name in the system immediately." Veronica's hand trembled as she ended the call. She turned to the nearby service computer, her fingers fumbling over the keyboard. When James Anderson's profile appeared on the screen, her heart sank. Beside his name was a special designation: Executive Level Primary Shareholder. Veronica's mouth went dry. This wasn't just any passenger. James Anderson wasn't simply wealthy. He was one of the airline's owners. Back in the main cabin,
That's what I'm
James
talking
watched as
about.
Veronica emerged from the galley, her face pale and her steps less confident. She approached their row hesitantly, her usual air of authority conspicuously absent. "Mr. Anderson," she began, her voice low and uneven, "I'd like to apologize for the inconvenience. It seems there was an error on my part."
Oh, brother,
James
save
turned
it.
to her slowly, his expression calm but unreadable. "An error," he repeated, his tone neutral. "You removed my family from first class based on what exactly?" Veronica swallowed hard, her words faltering. I made a mistake in verifying your reservation.
Oh,
I assure
get
you it
out
won't
of
happen
here.
again."
Get out
Celeste
of
looked
here.
at Veronica sharply, her composure cracking. "You embarrassed my family in front of an entire cabin. You made assumptions about us without any cause.
Damn
Do you
right.
really think an apology is enough?"
Damn right.
Liam looked up at his mother, sensing her anger, and shifted uncomfortably in his seat. James placed a calming hand on her arm. "Celeste," he said softly, his voice steady, "let's not escalate this here." He turned back to Veronica, his gaze piercing. "I'll handle this matter directly with your superiors," he said, his tone controlled but firm. "For now, we'll remain where we are." Veronica nodded stiffly, unsure how to respond. She retreated back to the galley, her steps quick and unsteady. The full weight of her mistake was sinking in, but she still didn't grasp how far-reaching the consequences would be. James leaned back in his seat, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. He had made his move, and now it was only a matter of time. Veronica returned to the galley, her hands trembling as she gripped the counter for support. The realization of who James Anderson truly was left her reeling. She replayed every interaction with the family, each one now a glaring indictment of her actions. She glanced nervously at Grace, who was watching her with a mix of disappointment and pity. "Did you know?" Veronica whispered, her voice shaky. Grace sighed, shaking her head. "No, but it doesn't matter. You treated them unfairly, and now it looks like you're going to answer for it." Veronica's stomach churned. Before she could respond, the galley phone buzzed once more. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the receiver before finally picking it up. The captain's voice was tense. "Miss Summers," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I've just received another call from the executive office. Mr. Anderson's identity has been confirmed and they're not happy. The instructions are clear. He and his family are to be reinstated in first class immediately. And you're to personally deliver an apology." Veronica's grip on the phone tightened. "Understood," she managed to reply, her voice barely above a whisper. When the line went dead, she leaned against the counter, her heart racing. Grace crossed her arms, her gaze unrelenting. "You brought this on yourself. Do the right thing before it gets worse." Summoning what little courage she had left, Veronica prepared herself. She adjusted her uniform and walked back toward the main cabin. Every step felt heavier than the last, the weight of her mistake pressing down on her. As she approached the Anderson family, passengers turned to watch, their curiosity palpable. "Mr. Anderson," Veronica began, her voice softer than anyone had heard it before. "On behalf of the airline, I'd like to sincerely apologize for the inconvenience and the way your family has been treated. It was an error in judgment, and I take full responsibility." Celeste raised an eyebrow, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "Now you realize it's an error?" she asked, her voice cold. Veronica's face flushed, but she kept her tone professional. "The executive office has instructed that your family be returned to first class immediately. I will personally ensure that your seats are ready, and that no further disruptions occur." James looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a small nod, he stood and gestured for Celeste and Liam to follow. Celeste held Liam's hand tightly as they walked past Veronica, her back straight and her gaze forward. Liam, still unaware of the gravity of the situation, clutched his toy airplane as he skipped slightly beside his mother. When they reached first class, Veronica busied herself preparing their seats, ensuring every detail was perfect. She placed sparkling water on the tray tables and adjusted the pillows with trembling hands. James, Celeste, and Liam settled in, their demeanor calm but distant. As Veronica stepped back, she offered a final apology. "If there's anything else you need, please let me know." James nodded slightly, his tone polite but firm. "We'll let you know." Veronica retreated to the galley, her face pale and her nerves frayed. She had followed the captain's orders, but the damage was already done. The murmurs in first class had subsided, but the disapproving looks from the passengers lingered. Grace, standing quietly in the galley, shook her head as Veronica returned. "It's not over," Grace said quietly. "You know that, right?" Veronica didn't respond. She knew Grace was right. James's calm demeanor wasn't one of forgiveness. It was the calm of someone who had already set the wheels of accountability in motion. And for the first time, Veronica understood that the repercussions of her actions were only just beginning. As the flight settled back into a semblance of normalcy, Veronica tried to focus on her remaining duties, but her mind was clouded with anxiety. Every glance from the passengers felt like a silent judgment, every interaction a reminder of her earlier mistake. She glanced toward the first-class cabin where James...
No, I'm not watching 1 hour of this, bro. It's already been 24 minutes, dog. Basically, she got fired and that's it, man. You know what I'm saying? She got fired, she lost her job, and I'm pretty sure she's banned from, you know what I'm saying? I'm not watching an hour. What is this thing, man? An hour? No way I'm not going to watch for 1 hour because it's starting to become... Where's the most replayed part?
Occur in the first place. Back at her apartment, Veronica sat on her couch, staring blankly at the termination notice on her laptop screen.
I told you, she got fired, man. You know what I'm saying, bro? Basically, she got fired. What I'm going to say is never judge a book by its cover. They teach you this at school in, like, kindergarten, bro. Never judge a book by its cover. So, who the hell gives you the right to assume that someone doesn't belong somewhere? And at the same time, too, right? Before you get onto an airline, before you get onto an airplane, you obviously, like, you know, when you're getting seated, they obviously check your tickets and where you're going to be sat. How can they make a mistake like that? It's especially in first class, dog. Get out of here, man. This lady was just dumb. Veronica, man, go kick rocks, man. I know Veronica's probably crying right now, bro, because she's terminated big time, bro. The termination is crazy, and it's going to be on her record, too. And that's... Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's going to get sued big time, too, dog. Whew. Man. You just ruined your life for being so dumb. That's why I'm telling y'all. Never judge a book by its cover. You never know. The person you might think, oh, this person's poor, this person's that. He might be a son of a president. You know what I mean? Anyways, it's your boy, Beats X, live and direct, live in the flesh. See y'all later.